Morning. I thought I would take what I would consider a regal entrance, fancy stairs, but in all honesty, I had to hang on to the railing because I don't know if any of you are like me, but at my age, even standing up and trying to put on your shoe without holding on to something becomes a challenge. So I'm sure some of you will identify with me. This may or may not work. Maybe not. It's too heavy. Okay, I'll get rid of some of this stuff. I've always have that dilemma when I'm sharing in terms of the medium. There's so many mediums these days, right? We've got, this may work. Bear with us a little bit. Oh, good. So my first thought was, should I just use the iPad? You know, all the stuff is here, but that's kind of old-fashioned already, I think. You know, we've moved beyond that. So, what about an iPad? I could do that. Yeah, it's all here. It even has a keypad or keyboard on it. It's all, yeah, but that's kind of past, I think, as well. Phone. Oh, yeah. The message is on there, too. Yeah, that's so tiny. That's too small. So I have turned it off, by the way. So I think I'll just go back to the old school style of a binder that has cats and dogs, and I have no idea. I don't like cats or dogs. I have no idea where this came from. But anyway, we're going to use that instead. So good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think some of you might recognize me from my work at the Soup Kitchen. Others may not. I am currently the executive director there, almost 5 years in July. My third unretirement job. My wife knows fully that to have me retire wouldn't work at all. I don't think I would drive her totally crazy, but partially. But after 52 years almost, I think she's used to my style, and that I've tried to convince her that I'm funny, but it just hasn't worked. And she's not here today because we had 6 of our 12 grandchildren over for an overnighter, and some of them had soccer this morning, so she couldn't come. But I'll share a little story that has not related to what I'm talking about today at all. And that is that I try to convince my wife that I'm funny all the time. And I tell her, you know, there's 2 of us in our house now. One of us thinks I'm funny, so that's 50%, right? Now, baseball, 50%, that's batting 500. Nobody bats 500 in baseball. I mean, that's rare. So anyway, that's an aside. It has nothing to do with this at all. My real claim to fame is my wife, Joan, my long-suffering wife of almost 52 years. Our 4 children, our 4 married in-law children, and 12 grandchildren, 6 of which were over last night, ages 6 to 20 almost. So yeah, so we're old. We've been on this earth for a while. I've spent most of my adult life with church-based organizations such as Mennonite Central Committee, Food for the Hungry, and doing work in international relief and development. And some of you may think, what on earth does that have to do with the Soup Kitchen? Well, it has quite a bit to do with that. My focus over the years, has been primarily in Eastern Africa, and I've spent a lot of time in countries such as Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Mozambique, et cetera, with a focus on food security. Being involved in the distribution of food for the Food Grains Bank. Any of you know of the Food Grains Bank? They grow food, farmers make their land available. I've been involved in distributing food, bags of wheat grain in Ethiopia and other countries. So food insecurity is a huge issue around the world, including in Lethbridge, which doesn't make sense really, but it is. We have 3 large low-income seniors residences here in the city, Home Rest Hague and Hardy Manor, Hague Towers, who each of which have about 100 and some residents. Many of them, some of you may live there, some of them actually have to decide between buying medication and buying food. So we at the Soup Kitchen, I'll tell more about that later, have also expanded to where we provide for these kinds of places, along with 13 other agencies in our city. So what you see is there's a lot more there. What's the line? What you see is not what you get, or something like that. I don't know. So we've expanded a lot in that area as well. So the connection between food insecurity in Africa and other countries and here is that there's a high degree of food insecurity here as well, especially with the homeless. So Pastor Mark asked me several months ago, I think, if I would share a message with you this morning, not necessarily knowing that I don't give messages. I graduated with a degree in theology, back in the early 80s. So I'm kind of trained for that, but that's so long ago that I'm not sure it's even true anymore. Knowing that it's very difficult to put something together, some all-encompassing talk about the homeless, the poor, and the church, which is kind of the title of this message: the poor, the homeless, and the church. And by extension, each one of us, because we are the church. What is our responsibility? My plan for this morning is to create a degree of awareness around the issue of poverty and homelessness here in Lethbridge, and quite possibly shock you with the reality of the situation right now, right here in your church neighborhood, literally 2 blocks away. I'll be showing you some raw images, untouched images of the difficult situation that people face. I never focus on the faces of people that are homeless because their dignity is at stake. And we do our best to always enhance and restore the dignity of people. There's no dignity in standing in line at the soup kitchen. And speaking of standing in line, we changed that. We now serve people sitting down like a restaurant. And they're served there, and they don't have to walk in a line, because a soup kitchen line is probably the lowest form of humanity almost. You know, you are humbled to the point where you're standing in line and somebody's plopping food, that doesn't sound good, onto your plate. So we don't do that. We serve them. That's the one advantage that we have found from COVID, that we've changed that because of the COVID restrictions and limitations and all of that. I've been asked frequently about the primary causes for people experiencing homelessness, or sleeping rough, as the sanitized version would be, which I despise, sleeping rough. So if you don't have a home, you're sleeping rough, right? Yeah, well, it's homeless. And although my responses aren't exhaustive as to what the reasons are, I'll give you a few. Very often it's poor, abusive upbringing in their childhood. Often it's trauma associated with past experiences, and you hear about residential schools and 60s Scoop and all of those things. The lack of a supportive network, including abandonment by friends and family who are embarrassed with their lifestyle. Discrimination. It is real in this city. Addiction. Now that's a topic in itself. We could spend probably the better part of a day just talking about the causes of addiction, the results of the use of various illicit drugs, and the fact that people die when they continue to use drugs. I see that regularly and tell people, right sitting across from them, if you keep up with this lifestyle, you will die. It's just a matter of when. And we see that. We see a lot of people dying right in front of our building. No issue to me or problem is insurmountable. And we sang about that this morning. God is able. Especially to a God we serve. So I will be sure to provide you with some relatively simple, and maybe not so simple, ways that you can become even more aware and possibly involved with some of those that are deeply affected. It's often said that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I don't want to look at you and say you are part of the problem. But if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So let's begin with a word of prayer and petition to our Lord. Lord, we're thankful for the opportunity to gather today and for each person who chose to be here and online. I know that in these days, many choose to be online, and that's fair. We just pray for them as well, and pray that this talk will hit home with them at the same time. Father, we're mindful of the degree of discontent in our society and the marked divisions around responses to the COVID pandemic. We continue to be thankful just knowing that you are still in control of all circumstances. As we spend time discussing the poor, extreme poverty, and homelessness, we ask for your guidance in knowing what you expect of us and how we need to respond. Be with us as we spend this time with you and with each other. Amen. This is, to me, such a huge, heart-wrenching issue or topic that it's hard to know where to begin. and how to limit the discussion to 20 or 30 minutes. I didn't even ask how long. If I see you nodding off or leaving the room, then I'll get the hint that maybe it's time to stop. While at the same time giving you a clear sense of what the Bible has to say about the issue. I think it's vitally important to begin by identifying the seriousness of the issues in our neighborhood. And this is best done by showing you a few images. So that's the cue for those folks manning the system back there. There's a few images will appear. So these images were taken this week, and they're on a little loop, so they'll repeat themselves. So this is what we're seeing recently in front of our building. And now I'm on the screen there too, I better back off. This is how people lived. This is when it was really, really cold. It's become increasingly difficult to control the tent cities that pop up. We were, stop at that one, back up one more and maybe stop it there. That's for later. We were told by the chief of police, what you need to do is to put up no trespassing signs. So we did. And the reason for that is they said that if you call us and they are there and the sign says no trespassing, we can ticket them for trespassing. And, oh my. But we did it, only because we needed to have some source or some route that we could take if it got really, really bad. I am the last person to call the police because the police can't do anything. They can arrest. One young woman showed me seven tickets she had for trespassing. This was early on when Alpha House, which is the shelter next to us, when they did the calling. I finally said, stop calling. Unless you can come up with some places for people to go. Now, how are you going to send someone away without giving them an option of where to go? That's our problem. We have no options. We send them away, but you can't be here, you can't be there, you can't be here, you can't be anywhere. So we want to just pretend that you don't exist, but they do. So these photos are just very few of many, many that I could have. After the election, I chose to get serious about creating awareness about homelessness, and I posted pictures on our Facebook page. Are some of you on the Soup Kitchen Facebook page? Are you Facebookers? If you are a Facebooker, then you should be a part of the Soup Kitchen Facebook page. It's just Lethbridge Soup Kitchen on Facebook. We post something every day, pretty well every day, sometimes more than once. So it gives you a better idea of what we're attempting to do. So I posted these things, and I got a phone call from my mayor friend, Mayor Blaine Higgin. Bill, people don't like that you're so negative. I stopped and I said, can you explain that a bit further? We know each other very well. He said, well, people think you're really negative by posting all these pictures. I said, well, that's reality. And if reality is negative, then let's deal with it. And so he said, I'm having difficulty explaining why you're doing that. I said, don't explain. Tell them to call me. Here's my number. You know it. Call. Come and see us. So it's one thing to, let's just push it away and it doesn't exist, right? And that's kind of what we'd like to try to do. I'll end my talk a little bit later. So sorry, I'm not quite done yet. With what I call some simple things that you can do, not to solve the problem, but to make a difference in the lives of the people caught up in the cycle of poverty and homelessness. So let's dig a little bit deeper, and some would call it unpacking. I think pastors use the term. Let's unpack that verse. I'm not very good at unpacking stuff, so in fact, we just finished unpacking. We came back from a week and a half in Mexico, so I think the color is basically gone. It's snow, I think, just kind of erases it all. So we'll look a little closer into what God's Word has to say, or the writers of God's Word have to say about this topic. A really quick search identified 100 plus verses, and there's many more, I'm sure, that provide some direction as to how God would have us respond to the needs of the poor. This, if I can turn my page here, my wife tells me, stick to your notes or you'll just go on and on and on. So I haven't been totally successful in that one. It makes it abundantly clear by the verses that I'll identify a few of, not many, that helping those in need is our responsibility. And from my understanding, we will also be held accountable for what we didn't do. That's scary for me. That he will say, as he does in Matthew 25, when, he asks, or they ask, when did we do this for you? It's what you did to those. So I think we'll be held responsible for what we haven't done. Creating awareness results in responsibility. And that's not always fun. Sometimes it's better just not to know. I, having spent a large portion of my adult life in Africa, not living there, but going there and spending time, I have some siblings, and I have many. I have 6 brothers and 6 sisters. Some of them have never asked me one thing about any of the many, many trips I've taken to Africa. Nothing. Not a word. Why? Because the more you know, the more is expected of you. And if you close your eyes, if you drive by the soup kitchen, never look there, like I did my first 4 years, I had no idea. We moved here 8 years ago. I had no idea that there was a soup kitchen here. I had no idea there was a shelter. So I'm as guilty as anyone else. The city has suggested building a high fence along Stafford so you can't see them, you know. Of course, I will argue that to the nth degree because that's not the way they answer it. Perhaps the most familiar passage in verse is Matthew 25, verse 44 and beyond, where Jesus' reply to a question about when they saw him hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick and in prison did not help him, his reply was, whatever you did for the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. So we're serving God by serving others. Now, that's not a novel idea. That's there. We all know that. I have a little trouble with that verse. Because when it says the least of these, my first inclination is to think they are the least. They have less value than anyone else. And the answer to that is that's not true. God created all people in the same way. We're all created equal. We have different opportunities. But when it says the least of these, I read that to say in our society. In that society back in his day when Jesus was on this earth, and also in our society today. Homeless people, highly addicted people, poor people are viewed as being less value, having less value than you and I. And of course, that's not true. You know, they can't contribute. All of the stereotypes we hear. So we can deduct from this that by helping others, we're actually helping and responding to him. And we should be just anxious to get going on that, right? I know some of you do already. Maybe all of you do. We should be more than anxious to find a way that we could serve him by serving those right in front of us here. So looking at my watch, as I tend to do, I'm already seeing that tackling both the plight of the poor and the issue of homelessness will not be possible because there's not enough time for that. So I will need to discuss some of these other issues another time, and we should be talking about and creating solutions, knowing that people that God created are suffering in silence. They really are. So switching the topic a little bit to the soup kitchen. That's who I represent. I'm here representing the soup kitchen and those in need. And it's interrelated. It really is, because we serve the poor, the poorest of the poor. As some of you will know, we've been in operation for 38 years, having started in a church basement in October 1st of 1984. I think that's 38. Seems right. You can take a calculator and figure that out. I think it is. It was started by our former director, Joyce Crittenden. Some of you have met her. She did that for about 34 years until I came, or something like that, 33, if the math, yeah. They did it in a church basement, several church basements, and did 2 light lunches a week. Soup, therefore, soup kitchen. That's the only reason it's called a soup kitchen, because they serve soup. I don't know how often we serve soup. We really don't. We're in the midst of a discussion around a name change, because the soup kitchen has a bit of a negative connotation to it. It really does. Oh, go to the soup kitchen if you can't. Yeah. So that's being discussed. Not sure if that'll happen. We have expanded significantly. We're now serving 3 hot, nutritious meals a day. And as I told you, served at the table. They will bring the plate right to the people where they're seated. Some have told us it's like a fancy restaurant that they've never been to. We have music. We have entertainment. We do all kinds of things to make it normal. Not that we ever want to see a soup kitchen as being a normal place, but we want to normalize it as much as we can. So we serve 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, with the exception of Sunday, which we have a brunch, which is just finished. It started at 10:30. And then all the others, we have breakfast, lunch, and the evening meal. We're very fortunate to receive upwards of $50,000 worth of food. You imagine going shopping for $50,000 worth of food every month? My mom and dad probably had to do that back then with a large family. Half of which we share with others because we simply cannot handle that much food. So we do a lot of sharing. We're blessed to have about 750, I've lost count, volunteers on our roster. We lost a high percentage of those when COVID was at its worst. Our own children said, Mom, I guess that too, because my wife is called, I'm referred to as Mr. Bill, and my wife is Mrs. Bill. Now, that's not politically correct anymore, but she doesn't mind. And so our kids told us, Mom and Dad, you shouldn't be going there. It's a dangerous place to be. Yes, we both got COVID back a year ago, February, 2 years now. When you deal with the most vulnerable, it's riskier. Anytime you're working with the poor, there's some risk, not a lot of risk, but you have to lay aside your own agenda and help others. It's been, and we are very fortunate to receive sufficient donations to meet our monthly expenses, which are close to $25,000 a month, most of which is wages, even though we don't pay high wages. It's just the nature of the work. We have to pay our utilities, fuel for our van, making, whatever, the staff. We have 12 staff, all part-time. Nobody works more than 4 hours. I do a bit more than that. My wife says she doesn't want to keep track how many hours. So it's been quite challenging during this whole COVID-19 pandemic, given that several primary sources of revenue were no longer an option. So things like fundraising events were simply not possible. We did 3 or 4 a year, accounted for about 25% of our income. Grants were also probably 20% of our annual income. Those dried up. I still don't know why, but grants stopped. I think don't mind me saying this, I think people's brains stopped working sometimes. So we had no more grants to apply for. And our regular donors were hesitant to give because their own jobs were at risk. They didn't know, would they have a job themselves? Churches started to reduce the amount that they would give us because they were unsure about what would happen. And you heard Pastor Mark say now, some churches are at risk of closing. And others saw a decrease in giving because we still, in churches, have a very old school approach to giving. It's still sort of placing something in a container. And if we don't have that container in front of us, then we don't give. And we'll make up for it next month. Doesn't always happen. So churches were struggling. So we saw a marked decrease in the amount of money that was coming to us. So this concern came to a head in late October, around the 20th, when we realized that we had no money. We had about $40,000 in reserve, but a previous board treasurer had placed that in an account that wasn't accessible till the end of December. So we knew it was there, but we couldn't use it. We didn't borrow money because we don't. We also don't receive any government funding, zero. We choose not to, because we can do it from a Christian perspective if we're not controlled by government. And we've seen control, and I won't go there because that would have me go in too many directions. So a local pastor decided, which was a very good idea, we should have a prayer meeting, and we did. 25 people met. I think it was on the 25th of October, I'm not sure, met to pray about the finances for the soup kitchen. We left there encouraged. One person gave a check, and I'm not talking here about wanting you to give. That's not what it's about. I went back to my office on October 30th. It was payroll day, and our account was at minus $11.25. And with our salaries, wages, and benefits and submissions to the government, we needed just over $9,000. So I went home after spending some time there, just continued to pray. Went back on the 31st of October. Now payroll is due, mostly via e-transfer. It still had to be done. I'm sitting here. No, I can't go in the red. Mail comes at 10 o'clock. And you know the answer here because God knew that answer. There was a check in the mail for $10,000. Now, my first thought was, Lord, couldn't you have done that yesterday? Like, why would you have to wait till the last day? And of course, his response might have been, don't you trust me? Well, yeah, I do. But it would be nice to have a little bit of a cushion time. We were able to pay everybody. I went back home again and wrote a very raw, and you can, if you go on our Facebook page, you'll find it way back. I wrote what I call a raw and vulnerable post about where we were at. When you're responsible as the director of an organization, you're also responsible to make sure the money is there to pay. They never tell you that when you accept the job, that you're also a fundraising guy, but you are. And so I put out a very raw post, and that unbelievable. There's lots of things I could tell you. I won't, other than to say that my wife and I had planned to be in the U.S. because we have kids there. They opened up the border for us to go, and we went. In the midst of that, Joan will remind you that remind me, or would tell you that I spent a lot of time. We went to Montana, Arizona, California, and I spent quite a bit of time on the side of a freeway on a parking lot at Denny's being interviewed by local media via Zoom. Our account now stands at just under $300,000. I normally don't talk about dollars and cents, but this is worth it. Because look at, we went from minus 1125 up to just under $300,000. Doesn't mean we're awash in money, because we will spend money. But that happened in the span of about under 3 weeks' time. And it was only because we were honest, only because God moved the hearts of people. And we had some fairly large donations. We still have them coming. People decided by my suggestion that maybe put us on a monthly kind of a commitment, and that's coming, that's happening, and it's since then, this is middle of, almost March now, right? We have paid all of our bills, and our account has not dipped at all. So we pay, and it comes back in. It's a dream. I should leave now while things are really good, because you should always go when things are just perfect. So it's just amazing how the Lord leads, and anyway, we could go on and on. So I'm sure that some of you have spent some time at the soup kitchen, volunteer. We don't need to raise your hands, with us either a long time ago or recently, and for that, we're very thankful. We could not function without you. As I said we had one staff person on at one time. I'd mentioned earlier that I'd give you some very simple suggestions on how you can make a difference in the lives of a poor or homeless person. How am I doing for time? Can somebody give me a bit of a hint as to whether I should wrap up soon, or should I keep going for a bit? That's okay? 5 minutes? 5, 6, 8, 10, 14, 13 and a half. It starts with something as simple as making eye contact with a person. This sounds so simple, but when you come to the soup kitchen, and maybe you have already, I encourage our volunteers make eye contact with people, because the first level of acceptance of a person for you to tell them they exist is to make eye contact. We spend a lot of time in Japan as well. Even before cell phones, they don't make eye contact with you at all. It's always just looking down. They walk around like this, and there's no eye contact. Just because then you have to acknowledge that they exist, and rather you just live in your own little life. There's lots more to that. Having spent some time in missions in Japan, I could tell you all kinds of stuff about that, but I won't. So that immediately legitimizes them as a person, because you've now made eye contact. Then you strike up a basic conversation. Hello, my name is Mark. My name is Bill. My name is whatever your name is. Ask them their name. Immediately there's a bit of identification that you are interested in them and in their name. I'm not suggesting that as a woman you should necessarily meet a homeless person on the street and strike up a conversation, because that wouldn't be wise. It wouldn't be wise for anybody. It opens up a whole range of avenues. Now, what I always tell people, when the conversation starts, don't offer them to come to your home. Don't offer them money, because they don't need money to eat. We provide food. Money normally goes to other things that you and I would not consume. And so that's not helping at all. In the cold, offer a pair of gloves. A lot of them, we have started handing out gloves and toques and hats and stuff like that, because a lot of the agencies that do that are closed after 4 o'clock and not till 9, open again. People are cold at night, and so when they come, we will give them things. But it's amazing, when you're a user and you have gloves on, you can't roll things and you can't stir things and you can't smoke things with gloves, so they drop them, and they won't pick them up again. They get trampled on under the snowdrift. You can give somebody a pair of gloves 3 or 4 times a day, and they still don't have gloves. But it's still worth it for that short time that they have. We see too many people coming in with fingers frozen. We've seen several amputations last year. I haven't noted this year, but yeah, it's just something a simple thing you can do. Let me tell you a quick story about my own experience recently in California. There's something about when you're involved with work, and maybe Pastor Mark would know that, would also agree that if you're in a particular field, you feel like you are kind of legitimate enough that you can say something somewhere. So because I work with the homeless, we're in California, Venice Beach, and there's a few people around. And my wife will know this. I will see a homeless person, and I'll go over and talk to them. And she'll say, well, just hand me the key. I'll just go to the car. And she does. So I met this fellow. His name was Mark, by the way. And Mark, there's one tree. Venice Beach doesn't have a lot of trees. It's the beach. There's one little tree there. And he's got a blanket draped around. He's laying on a sleeping bag. So I walk over them and say, hi, my name is Bill. What's yours? Da, da, da. And I said, I work with homeless people. Now, immediately, I feel like I'm legitimate enough that I can have this conversation, right? And I said, so what brings you here, Mark? He said, well, this is Los Angeles, the land of opportunity. And mine never came. I said, okay, so what keeps you here? Lack of motivation on my part. And secondly, there's no assistance anywhere. Okay. So we talked for a while. And I said to him, as a believer, I find this really hard. And I don't know the scripture passage, but is it the Good Samaritan story? I'm not sure. Where you just move on and say, all the best to you, I hope things get better, but you don't do anything. So I said to him, Mark, I feel really bad. I can't do anything for you. He said, well, you have. You have. He was a very well-spoken person. He said, you have done more than I have experienced for many, many years. I said, what's that? You stopped and talked to me. He said, you made my day. You absolutely made my day by coming to talk to me. So that's how easy it is. It's just so easy to just show some interest in something. You can't solve their problem. You never will. I really don't think you will, because they've got to solve it themselves. That's not something he can solve it, but that's not an instant fix either. Just because you become a Christian, when you become a Christian, could you agree with me your problems don't all dissolve? I don't think. If they did, this church would be overflowing to the rafters with people, because that's not how it works, but it gives you a fighting chance. So volunteering, acknowledging people are 2 very simple responses, with a third one being assisting by raising funds in some form. I heard someone talk about maybe doing a love offering. Those kinds of things are very helpful. But let me tell you another story. I love to share with people, and I'm doing a bit more of that these days, only because I'm saying yes, and I probably shouldn't, but I have been. So I went to Calvin Christian School. You know of Calvin Christian School? Large out here. 850 students, roughly, and there were maybe about this many in a room. I think it was the student council or something, and the rest were on there online. So I shared with them about some of these things, and these kids were so moved that a week later, one of their teachers called me and said they had raised just under $7,000 to help kids. Now, that must be their parents' money. I don't know where, unless you have teens, they don't have a lot of money usually, but over $7,000 is being brought to me on Tuesday. This is how people can do something, because they ask, what can we do? Well, you can make eye contact, you can volunteer, and you can raise funds, and they have done that. So that's not my intent, but if that becomes the sort of the side benefit, that's fine as well. So having touched ever so briefly on homelessness and the current struggle, I will only say that there simply isn't the political will at any government level to introduce any meaningful programs that will help alleviate the problem. I have become quite vocal. I've become kind of an advocate for the poor with no fear, because my skin is really thick already at my age, that I'm not easily offended by stuff. If they don't like it, they can lump it. The mayor says to me, Bill, stop posting pictures. As a favor to him, I did, but we still talk about it often. We have a weekly discussion about stuff like that. There's answers for housing, all kinds of great. I had a little video up, but I guess it was copyright and we can't show it. But it's just a little tent-type structure that you could pull over yourself and was insulated, and so you don't have to lay outside. You can be warm, but the problem is where? Where would it go? You've heard of NIMBY? Not in my backyard? That's the biggest thing. We were going to partner with a mustard seed. It was basically, we had a date set, March 23rd. There was a vote at City Council that we would purchase the building over here, Western 1. We had plans on my desk. We're ready to start on the 24th. That's almost a year ago. Nothing happened. Mustard seed basically has left town because it's just nothing is happening. So we thought, okay, then we will do it ourselves. So we're in the midst of looking to move so we can expand our programming beyond what we are doing now. And so that might come to you as a discussion, as an opportunity to become involved. And so that's, I'm sticking my neck out probably further than I should, but it's okay. So I'm hoping I haven't muddied the waters on this issue. I've identified, but rather have encouraged you to get involved in some way. And this coming from me who has a front row seat, literally by our windows. This is where people hang and they overdose and so on. And I have spent time feverishly doing chest compressions to try to revive somebody. And my fear is that it becomes so common that it's just an everyday thing. These are still people. But I must admit, a fellow by the name of Lloyd, probably in his early 60s, so highly addicted that he overdosed 4 times a day, roughly, at tremendous costs to you, to your system, and the use of emergency services personnel. He overdosed again, probably about 2 months ago, maybe 3. And he was right there. And I found myself having a hard time not praying that God would just take him home. What's home for him, right? Highly addicted. Son and daughter on either side of him, both highly addicted as well. And he died. His name was Lloyd. But you ask yourself, how many more times can you save somebody? Does he really want to be saved? Rescued? Sometimes when people are revived from a high, they come up swinging because you took them out of what they last remember as a high, something enjoyable. So having the front row seat to the issue of poverty, but I haven't even mentioned drug addiction. That's just a huge topic. And you know that there are as many people addicted in private homes as there are out on the street to opioids that doctors have prescribed. It's going on every day. Because the stronger the meds you need, the closer they are likely to be opioids and highly addictive. Even suicide rates are just as high in private homes as they are out in the public. So we have a huge problem, and we don't know how to address it, so we just cover it up and hope that it'll go away, and it will not go away. It will not. 75 to 80% of our guests are Indigenous people, which is a problem in itself, because the Indigenous leadership does not care about their own people. I say that publicly and they'll say I'm racist. That's okay. It's truth. They do not care about their own people. So we're working with them to try to find a way that they would set up a soup kitchen on the reserve. We'll help them, So there's lots of issues that are unsolved. We will not solve them today. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to come and share with you this morning. And even though it's a difficult, challenging topic, it needs to be addressed. And I feel strongly that God has asked me to be a voice for those without a voice, and a catalyst for change. I realize this morning's talk has been far from a sermon, but then again, I'm far from a pastor. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know we're out of time, but I do want to give you a moment or two to ask some questions if you like. Is that okay? Any questions? There isn't a bad question. There isn't an inappropriate question. Anybody? Any question? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just call the soup kitchen number, which is also my number on this phone, but it's turned off now, so it won't ring. And I will then, what I ask people to do is I find out how many people are there. Do you have a preference to a certain meal? Because we do 3, right? Have you been there before? That tells me who the best coordinator would be to work with you. And then, do you have a time frame? Do you want to do it like March, April? Do you want breakfast? Do you want lunch? And then I ask you to send me a text which I'll then forward on to our meal coordinators. We used to have them just call the soup kitchen, but the staff don't have time to answer the phone. In the midst of a meal, that they don't. And I found I was losing a lot of messages, so I just kind of live with the fact that my phone is with me all the time, unless I turn it off like now. And I'm sure there will be messages. I saw one already. Somebody needed something. So just phone our number. It's there. It's easily found. And we'll arrange a time. If you want the evening meal, that's going to be a bit of a challenge because it's usually filled. It's easier to volunteer in the evening than it is during the day for most people. And so, but just contact us. We'll walk you through it. It's easy. It's safe. I hesitate to say anything is safe because life isn't safe, but we haven't had any. We have security people. We have a wand that we check for, for weapons or metal objects. And we have security that actually watch. We hired a new security recently who literally stands in the middle of the dining room and, they don't like it much because they know him from the mall. He works there on the weekends. He's had to turf them out a few times. So we've had a few people. We don't let people in if they're highly intoxicated or high. I always joke, not really joke, I guess I do. I joke with them that if you act like a fool, I'm going to assume you're either drunk or high, so don't do that. We won't let you in. So we will not allow people in that would be disruptive, could be seen as disruptive. We will provide them with a meal through Alpha House. They will come and bring the meal and eat it inside. I will not have people sitting on the curb and eating. That's just like a dog, and we're just not doing that. So, So it's pretty straightforward. Just call our number. I can give it to you later. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any solutions? I'd like those too. All right. Well, if not, I'll be here for a bit. So again, thank you very much for the invite and for allowing me to share stuff that just so much more that I could share, but we'll save it for another time. Thank you very much.